Thank you so much. Hello, hello, hello. So our minds are full of images all the time, especially when we don't want them to be, right? When you're trying to get to sleep, often our heads flood with images of everything that's happened that day, everything that we should have said. I'm looking out the window now. My cat is having a standoff with a fox. So that's an image that's in my head. Lindsay's just been telling me that there's a leak in her study. So now my mind is also full of the image of Lindsay's study being flooded with water, right? And also I'm imagining all of you, because I can't see you, but I'm imagining you all looking at me. I have that image in my head too. But often when we sit in front of a piece of paper, even though our heads are full of images when we don't want them to be, suddenly nothing. It's like we go completely blank, right? Because actually giving ourselves permission to use our images when we want to use them, giving ourselves permission to see in our mind's eye. Wallace Stevens said, what we see with the mind is as real to us as what we see with the eye. That's why when you have a dream that you're running away from a monster and you wake up sweating, it's because your brain can't tell the difference, because you've imagined it so vividly. The image was so real that your body responded. But how do we summon those images when we sit in front of a page? And so much of that is to do with the discipline of freedom, right? People talk about like being free to write, just, write whatever comes into your head. But we don't live in a world that encourages us to do that. We live in a world that kind of wants us to be rational, that goes, where are you going with this? What's the point of this, right? But poetry doesn't operate like that, right? Poetry operates more like a dream. Like it will lead you somewhere, but you've got to trust it, and you've got to trust not knowing where you're going, and you've got to let one image flow to the next. And that takes a real kind of discipline. So we're going to do a series of experiments, hopefully fun experiments today for the next hour and a half, to try and release some of the images that are locked inside our brains. And on this subject of freedom, I wanted to start by, I don't know if any of you have ever had the daydream that you could freeze time. Has anyone had that daydream? Put like a thumbs up in the chat if you've had it, or some variation of it, that you could, click your fingers or something, and suddenly everyone else in the world would be like that. Yeah, okay, Sally's had it, right? And you would be able to wander around. I used to have this, I still have it sometimes now, especially when my 3-year-old is being particularly crazy. I just imagine that I could just freeze him for a second so I could lie down and eat a Twix, right? But I used to have it, at school a lot. I would imagine that everyone else was suddenly frozen, and I'd maybe steal a moped and drive down to the beach, or I'd go into someone's house and rearrange all their furniture and draw moustaches on their faces, or, just kind of have a bit of peace, right? And so I want us to think a bit about that, about what we would do if we could freeze time. But I'm going to kind of expand upon it, rather than just things you could do when no one was, when there'd be no consequences. You can also break the rules of physics a bit. So I want you to write at the top of the page just this one sentence. The sentence is, I'll write it in the chat. When the world's not watching. That's it. When the world's not watching. All right, has that been sent to everyone? Oh no, it's just been sent to hosts, and it's just been sent to myself, basically. Hang on, I'll do it again. That was, the world wasn't watching that. When the world's not watching. There we go. Okay. Now, let me think. Some of the things I do when the world's not watching. Because some of them will be just in my mind as well. When the world's not watching, I dance naked to ABBA, banging saucepans. I shout insults down the chimneys of my enemies. I suck on batteries to give myself vague electric shocks. I swim in circles around a dissolving island, right? And because it doesn't have to be literal, because when the world's not watching, I also turn into a bug and crawl under a leaf. Like I don't, but I do, And sometimes when the world's not watching, I want to do things that are maybe smaller, maybe even sadder. Like when the world's not watching, I bring my grandma back to life and have a cup of tea and tell her she's important and she hears me. Or I just watch my brother pick lint off his jumper. Or when the world's not watching, I abseil down a volcano. I make various sculptures out of paper clips, right? It doesn't really, the whole point of this exercise is to write as many as you can. And you don't need to repeat when the world's not watching. It doesn't need to be that kind of, when the world's not watching, don't do it, right? You just put when the world's not watching at the top, and then as many as you possibly can. But here's the thing about images is they have chemical reactions with each other, and they also clash with each other. What I mean by that is, I don't know if any of you have ever watched morning television. You probably haven't because you go to school. But they do this thing on morning television when they introduce it. It's quite freaky. And they'll be like, okay, good morning. Today we're going to, people are going to be phoning in about their favorite Christmas memories. And then we're going to talk to a woman who was repeatedly beaten and kept in a cupboard for 10 years. And then Jonathan's going to teach us how to make the perfect quiche. Right? And you're like, what? And they'll jump between these tones, right? And often in poetry, you can do that too. You can go from an image about digging a hole in the garden and screaming into it to an image about making a carrot cake with your best friend. You can jump right from the dark to the light and then back again and use that momentum to keep you going. The only rule for this is rather than writing, I imagine I eat a hamburger as big as my head, or I would eat a hamburger as big as my head, you just write, I eat a hamburger as big as my head. Because even though it's happening in your imagination, it's real. And as soon as you write it, other people can see it, you know, when they read it. I'm going to give you 7 minutes, write as many as you can. They can be disgusting, wonderful, happy, sweet, sad, ping off each other. Some of them might be really long, some might be really short. Whatever comes out of your pen. Okay, 7 minutes. I will time you. I'll shut up now. Go. Also, don't be afraid of writing rubbish lines too. Sometimes we need that to keep ourselves going. Don't try and make every line brilliant. Just keep going. You can always cut things later. Keep the momentum. if you get stuck, surprise yourself with the next line. So if you've written a loud line, write a quiet line. If you've written a sweet line, write a disgusting line. Keep yourself surprised. Okay, 2 more minutes. Now in these last 2 minutes, I want you to change tack a little bit. So rather than going between different tones, I want you to lean into one feeling. So if it's started to get sad, let it get sadder. If it started to get wild, let it get wilder. If it started to get angry, let it go angrier. Just these last 2 minutes, lean into the momentum of one particular feeling. And then 2 minutes, we can stop. Great. Okay, and finish up the one that you're on and abandon ship and come back to me through the wind and the rain of your own minds. Okay, and I just want you to, for a second, to look at what you've written, not in a kind of analytical way or a critical way, just in a mere fact way, right? A minute ago, 7 minutes ago, there was a blank page there, right? And now, magically, something has appeared, right? And that is the magic of writing, right? Is that you literally create something from nothing. People often talk about the fear of the blank page. I think that's the wrong way of thinking about it. The blankness is the most exciting bit, right? That's the thin air from which something can appear. And every time you think it won't happen, and then whoop, there it is, magically appeared, something from whence there was nothing. Now, would anyone like to read their whole thing? Right? Is there anyone we can have little, we can share little bits, but it would also be cool if anyone wanted to share their entire waterfall, unedited, straight from the open window of their mind. Anyone? That's a big ask, but cool. Anyone in the void? Beatrix and Atlas. Perfect. How do I hear you? Do you just start talking? So we start with Beatrice.
I will unmute Beatrix.
Brilliant.
There you go.
Hello, Beatrice.
Oh, I'm going to I'm going to make her a panelist.
Okay, perfect.
So she can do a reading. Great.
There you go.
There we are.
Hi.
Hello.
Should I just start reading?
Yeah, just read the whole thing. No apologies, just reading it, the whole thing.
Okay. When the world's not watching, I'd climb onto the roof and sing to the birds. I'd accelerate to 80 miles an hour. I'd ask my friend why she was mad, and she'd answer. I'd wear a medieval dress in the streets. I'd stick my hands in jars of sweets without gloves on. I'd climb to the top of the trees and catch a squirrel. I'd finally try out for any and all of the sports teams. I'd have a cup of tea and cake with my grandpa. I'd run to the end of the field and cry. I'd wear emotion on my sleeve.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you so much, Beatrix. And those images, you know, of running down to the end of the field to cry, the medieval dress, the catching the squirrel. I mean, right from the beginning, it started with you climbing into a tree, right? Was that the first line? Climbing into a tree?
Climbing onto the roof.
Climbing onto the roof, exactly. You know, we can see that, right? We don't have a sense of like, oh, when is the poem going to begin? No. The poem has begun and we are in it. We can see it. We are experiencing it with you. The only thing I would say is like you wrote I'd rather, you know, short. Could you just change that to I rather than I, just so you make the whole thing like real. So even though it's imaginary, because you've done it in your mind, and it's real. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I climb onto the roof, like, you know, perfect. It happened. It's the reality of dreams. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Shall we have Atlas next?
Atlas, I'll just allow you to talk.
Hi.
Hello, Atlas.
Hello.
Hi there. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Great. I'll read out mine. When the world's not watching, I go out in the wind. I go out in the wind, and the wind blows me away. I walk up a mountain and hold on to my hat. I walk up the mountain and I sink into the ground until the ash reaches my neck, and then my chin, and then my nose. I curl up beneath the earth and dream a little, and I have a nightmare I can't get back. I reach up and grab a badger and pick its bones clean. I dig myself up and fish for clouds, but fail to find a purchase. And then I sit down and wait for the wind to come back.
Great. And I love the kind of circularity of it as well. And it's interesting, isn't it, how you can have a huge image like walking up a mountain, but the fact that you're holding onto your hat, the hat makes the mountain real, right? So those little details that make the big details imagine, that we can imagine them, we experience them. And I love the surprise of picking the badger, the bones of the badger clean, you know. And also you read it so beautifully, and I felt like I was going into a kind of a visual trance when you were reading it. I could feel the wind blowing through my bones. Thank you so much, Atlas.
Well, thank you. It was great.
Great. Now, Kathleen says, I was really with you, Atlas. And that's a really good point, right? So in both of those Beatrix poems, Atlas poems we just heard, that sense of being with the poem, because that is what images are for, right? The point of an image in a poem is so that when you read it, you're not thinking about it, you're experiencing it, just like you experience a dream, right? The best poems, in my opinion, feel like they're happening to me, right? They're like, they become part of my internal cinema. I can see them, therefore I can feel them, therefore, you know, I can feel them in my fingertips. And they're an experience, and images are what make that happen. So, for example, when you're having a dream, we don't dream like we don't dream, oh, the sky was full of anxiety, do we? We dream the sky was full of these strange birds with flat beaks and googly eyes, whatever. You know, we dream in images, right? And that represents our emotions. In a dream, the image is the emotion, right? You're not dreaming in abstract concepts, you dream in images, and that's where the emotion is. And it's the same in poetry. The image contains the emotion. That's why often you can go through a poem and take out most of the abstract nouns, right? By abstract nouns, I mean like sadness, happiness, you know, hope, whatever. You can have a few of them sprinkled if you need them, but most of the time, if your images are working, you don't need them, because they'll do it for you, and they'll do it in a more complicated way. The images will make the poem happen. Does anyone want to, we've got so much to do, so little time, but if anyone else wants to put some of their lines in the chat box, I would love that. And hopefully we'll have opportunities to hear from other people in the next few exercises. But I want to so much to do. Right, share screen. So another strategy of creating images, after you've kind of given yourself that permission, like we just did, to release them all, is different ways of looking at the things we already know. Okay, so I'm going to share this Charles Simic poem with you. This strange fork. I've got a fork here, just so you can remind yourself what a fork looks like. This strange thing must have crept right out of hell. It resembles a bird's foot worn around a cannibal's neck. As you hold it in your hand, as you stab it into a piece of meat, it is possible to imagine the rest of the bird, its head, which, like your fist, is large, bald, beakless, and blind. Now, it's such a small poem, right? And yet it does make you look at a fork completely differently. Right? Just like, you know, when I was 10 years old and I was suddenly looking at my hands thinking, oh, I'm me looking out of my own eyes. This is so weird. And suddenly my hands looked really strange. I have that occasionally now, but not too often. Otherwise I'd go totally mad. But, you know, occasionally you'll look at something you've seen a million times and think, oh, that is quite weird. And part of being a poet is, well, it's like unsaning yourself. That's not a word, but occasionally making things strange for yourself, right? Just like when if the opposite, when you're trying to calm yourself down and just think everything's fine, there's no ghosts, everything's normal. Often when you're writing a poem, you're trying to see what isn't normal, right? You're trying to see the undercurrent, the strangeness, and that creates images. So what I want you to do is I want you to find an object near you, right? The more boring, the better. So it could literally just be your own pen if you want. You might, I mean, I know Beatrix looked like she was in a car, so whatever you can find in the glove compartment, Beatrix. Right, I mean, I've just picked up this candle here, right? I've got no interest in writing a poem about a candle, right? But luckily, that's not really what I'll be doing, okay? So for this, the point of it, we can nick that first line. You can always change it afterwards, but it might help to get that sense of this isn't normal. This strange thing must have crept right out of hell, right? Okay, this strange thing must have crept right out of hell. I'm gonna ad lib. It resembles a pus-filled eye, where the tears have clogged inside it. An eye with metal lashes, forced to see everything for eternity. Right, okay, well, you know, but I could carry on, right? Because just suddenly I look at this, the center of that candle, and I think, yeah, if I had no idea what that was, that's weird, you know? Or like these tweezers, weird, okay? And you can lean into the most outrageous image. The stranger you can make it for yourself, the further away you can get from a candle or whatever you've got in your hand, the better, right? Just see what you can turn it into. I'll give you a little bit shorter for this one, just so that you don't overthink it. It's all about just trying to see it differently. The strange thing was the crept right out of hell. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Whatever object you've got, just commit to it, even if it's incredibly boring, because you're going to suddenly make it incredibly interesting. 5 minutes, go. If you get stuck, look at it even closer. Try and expand upon the strangeness. Just really go for it, commit to it. Okay. 5 minutes. Now I would love to hear the random boring objects that everyone chose and decided had crept out of hell. If you could put them in the chat, that'd be great. And if anyone wants to read theirs that we haven't heard from already, that would be amazing. A tiny wrench. A hand, nice. A tiny wrench. A glass. Earplugs, perfect. A mug with remnants of tea. A pin. Great. A clock. These are perfect. Andre Breton once said that poetry is the saddest road that leads to everything, right? And I love the idea that a single napkin, a nearly empty tissue box, and a thick triangular pencil, perfect. That if you, in poetry, if you look at anything closely enough and commit to it, you can find everything in it, right? Of course, writing about a blade of grass is boring, right? If you were just writing about literally a blade of grass, but that's not what any poem does. You know, a poem transforms and changes the way we look, and you pull yourself in until a blade of grass, you know, like if you're I don't know, if you were going through a grief, say your parent had just died, if you wrote about a blade of grass, it would end up being about the fact that your parent had just died. You know what I mean? Everything that you feel, if you commit enough to an image, starts to bubble up through it, just like in a dream, right? We can't help it. The images become porous and they reveal us. But our job is to dream the dream. Okay, would anyone like to read it? Read theirs? I mean, I love all of these. Anyone? Or you can write it in the chat box if you want, and I can read it for you. Is another option. Don't worry about this quite weird silence. You can't be a poet unless you enjoy strange, uncomfortable silence. It's kind of intimate silence. Atlas, thank you so much. We just want to make sure that nobody else wants to read first, just so that. Okay, perfect. Oscar. Nice. What did Oscar choose? A mug with remnants of tea. All right. I'm going to try not to butcher this for you, Oscar. It is an ugly, heavy hole. I can peer down inside it to the grimy, grim depths, and I see myself staring back. From one side protrudes a curved ear, cocked to one side. Its surface is patterned, an eye here, an arm there. It watches and listens as I stare. It falls over. Its insides cascade out, tumbling over my desk. I look at it again. I look down its hole. I see nothing. I see another. Someone holds it. They pull it to their lips and tip it back. They guzzle its insides and leave it to die. Wow, brilliant. That's brilliant, Oscar. And like, you know, first of all, I'm not going to drink the rest of this cup of coffee in the same way now. I'm going to be thinking that I am guzzling the insides of this coffee. But also, you proved my point exactly, that the poetry leads to everything. Yes, that's a poem about a cup, but also it becomes a poem about being a human being, doesn't it? It becomes a poem about fear. It becomes a poem about curiosity, right? It becomes a poem about searching for life and meaning, all of those things, right? But your job was just to concentrate on the cup. If you'd sat down and gone, right, I'm going to write a poem about life and meaning, wouldn't have worked. But because you concentrated on the images and just went with it, then like a dream, it ends up being about everything. Well done. Is anyone else put theirs up? I love how Atlas has given you a whoa. Anyone else? Sally? Oh, well, Atlas, you can read yours if you like. There he is.
Hi again.
Hello again.
Yeah, mine's quite short. I can read mine.
Perfect.
This strange thing must have crept right out of hell. A steel crab's claw, amputated, used perhaps for torture or removing nose hairs. Sharp at one end, as if to pierce, as if it loves you and wishes to never let go. The type of jewelry a storm cloud might wear.
Brilliant. The type of jewelry a storm cloud might wear. That's perfect. Now I'm picturing storm clouds decorated like loads of tiny wrench earrings, you know. And I also love that kind of turn in it, as if it loves you and might never let go, you know. There's unexpected tenderness in the poem as well as the violence, right? Great, well done, thank you.
Thank you.
Well done. Okay, let's move on. Don't worry if you're still like, oh, I haven't read anything. First of all, if we get to the end and you haven't read anything, that doesn't matter, right, at all, because poetry is private until you choose to make it public, right? That the whole point of writing a poem, especially a first draft, is to feel completely free in the privacy of your imagination, right? As long as you have felt that and written something on the page, that's all that matters, right? But if later on you do want to read, that's great. But it doesn't matter either way. All that matters is you and the poem. I am just a vague voice in the sky. That made myself sound very, very powerful. I was meaning to sound humble, but I ended up sounding like a kind of demigod. Anyway, so let's move on to the next poem. So what have we covered so far? The freedom of releasing our images, right? Of letting them cascade out of us and feeling kind of unwitnessed in doing so, or unjudged. Looking at things through new eyes. And then the third thing is, so this sounds like a obvious thing to say, but getting an idea and holding on to it. So a concept or an idea, but actually committing to that one idea until it leads you to the rest of the poem. So I'm going to show you a poem like that. So this is written actually by I think she was 16 when she wrote this, because it was one of the winning Foyles poems several years ago. And I'll read it to you. At the funeral. Brother and sister take polar bears. Brother parks his between two F-150s, but sisters won't stay. Instead follows her to the front row of fold-out seats and licks her wrists when hungry. So she digs through her pockets for bits of raw seal. After the ceremony, she feeds brother's bear too. Family members say nothing because there aren't any rules against bears. Brother and sister take polar bears for a walk all the way to the Arctic and back. Bundled to their chins, they watch their bears ask other bears why it's so cold here. And other bears say it could be colder. Sun, a gravestone, ice, the body being buried. Time for the reception. Sister finds hers scraping its claws through layers of white to brown, scraping an H, an E, help, heaven, hello. And brother can't find his at all. Sister takes hers into the funeral home. And for a snack, it eats the whole plate. Crunch of ceramics. Mother says nothing because their father is dead. Mother says nothing but feeds the bear his shoes, his wallet, a wedding invitation he left magnetized to the refrigerator, which now sits filled with fish. And sister hates the bear and the way it smells, but falls asleep on a bench with her face in its fur, rubs its ears now she's out of seal, does nothing to make it leave, though she wonders why it stays. Now, I like that poem because you get a real feeling from it that you can't properly explain, a bit like in a dream. You can't it's hard to paraphrase as a poem, you know. You could say it's probably definitely about grief, right? But this image of the polar bear, oh, Beatrice, she loved that. Okay, great. This image of the polar bear that is always with them, right? This brother and sister, and they're at their father's funeral. But the poem just concentrates mainly on what's happening with these polar bears. And by that kind of, it's almost like misdirection, you know, like in when people are teaching magic, they'll talk about misdirection. Sometimes that's what images do in a poem. They kind of misdirect you from the main feeling, but as a result, the emotional trick works. Whereas if the whole poem had just focused on, you know, if you'd cut out the polar bear and you just had the father's wallet and the brother and the sister and the funeral, you know, we'd have gone, okay, this is sad. But we wouldn't have felt such a complexity of emotion, perhaps. It wouldn't have necessarily got under our skin in the same way. There's something about adding that image, that unexpected image, that misdirection, that makes it work on us. So I'd like you to think of an animal, right? Now, I usually hate it when people say that, you know, I mean, the worst thing people can ever do is basically have an icebreaker about what animal you are. It's not that, all right? And you don't even need to know really anything about the animal, right? You don't have to know You don't have to be a leopard expert, right? You can, you can treat it a little bit like she treats her polar bears. But the whole point is, this animal is going to represent a feeling that you carry around. You don't even need to know when you start writing what that feeling is. You definitely don't need to reveal it in the poem, right? It could be an anxiety, could be a grief, could be a love, could be, but I want you most of the time, if you can, to forget what it represents, okay? To forget that it's a metaphor for anything, right? A metaphor doesn't know it's a metaphor. A metaphor thinks it's real, right? So, and your job is to make it real for yourself. So you're going about your day and this eagle is just everywhere, right? So when where is it? Is it eating your curry on takeaway night? Is it fluttering at the door when you're trying to sleep? Is it pooing on your laptop? Right. You've got to make whatever animal you pick, make it real for yourself in your head. And just your job is just to think about all the different ways in which this animal is present in your life. It could be sometimes in a positive way. It might comfort you at sometimes, and then sometimes it might, retaliate and get weird. It might kill your cat. I don't know. Who knows? You don't know what it's going to do, basically, this animal. You'll know in the back of your head it represents some kind of feeling, but you're not going to concentrate on that. You're going to concentrate on making the image real, okay? Now, you might want to concentrate on a particular event, like she does, like having the polar bear at the funeral. Like you might want to, have the hedgehog at your birthday party. I mean, it's not very dramatic, a hedgehog, but if they were always there, could be. Or it might be just a normal day, or just, a whole fortnight, who knows, or a year. See what happens. I'm going to give you 7 minutes again. Be playful with it. If you get stuck, you can change location, right? You can be like, okay, well, what would happen in the supermarket? Or what would happen, if a friend came round? So if you get stuck, think of the cinematography. What else could happen with this scenario? What else could the poem then see? And that's how you keep going. All right. Have fun with it. And don't worry about the feelings. They'll take care of themselves. Go. A good way of keeping things real for yourself as you're writing is to introduce little mundane details, custard creams, mugs, things like that. That's what stops the kind of surrealism getting too kind of airy in your head. Keep it real for yourself. The eagle, the leopard is real because there's custard creams there or whatever. Two more minutes, keep going. A lot can happen in 2 minutes. Okay, finish up the bit that you're on, come back to me. I know it's a kind of, it's an odd feeling being, you know, immersed in a poem and then being yanked out of it again. It's a little bit like I'm sending you down scuba diving and then I keep on tugging on your rope real quick to bring you up to the surface, and you get the kind of creative version of the bends as you come up. It's a weird, slightly uncomfortable feeling, but all part of the process. So well done. I would love to hear which animals you chose, or which animals chose you, more like, in the chat. And if anyone again wants to read theirs, that'd be great. A deer, just everywhere. Sally's going to read. Perfect. We'll just squirrel, nice. Wolf. Oh, my cat is literally staring at me through the window, like, did you choose me?
Hello.
Hello, Sally.
So yeah, this one is about a deer.
Perfect.
Okay. The deer has been around for a month or so. I always feel it behind me. It follows me wherever I go. It's a timid thing. It doesn't want to be seen. If I turn, it flees. Then before I know it, it's right back behind me. I've started going on walks in the woods. I know the deer loves it there. I hear the drumming of its hooves. In the night when I'm asleep, it curls up next to me and it tells me what I'm doing wrong, but never how to improve. I wake up and it's gone till I go to the next room.
Great. What was the first line again? The deer?
The deer has been around for a month or so.
Great. The deer has been around for a month or so. Right, talk about like flinging open the door of a first line, like we're with you, right, immediately. Yeah. And even though we don't know what the deer means, we feel it. You know, it's like you've dreamt the dream, and now we can experience it and wake up from it and have the same feeling. You know, and I loved that, like that the image suddenly of then the deer curling up next to you, and it tells you what you've done wrong, but never how to improve. And then the walks in the woods as well, like it felt so honest, and yet we don't know why, which is what you want to do with your images. You know? I
don't think I know why either.
No, but that's when a poem really works, right?
Yeah,
a poem really works when you don't need to explain, right? When it's not, because part of the thing about poetry is if you could paraphrase a poem, if you could just sum it up, what would be the point of writing it? You know, poems are about those things that we can't actually say. They're like, you know, the unspoken, and that's why we go into poetry. That's why we use the poems instead to say what we can't say, you know.
Yeah.
And I have a deer with me all the time, a lot of the time too, you know. And I didn't know that until you read that to me, so thank you, well done.
Thank you.
Who anyone else would like to read theirs? A lynx, great. Squirrel, a deer, black cat and fox, or anyone would like to type theirs out and I will attempt to read it for them. A wren. Beatrix, yeah, great. Beatrix is going to read her lynx to us.
Hi.
Hello.
So yeah, I wrote about a lynx. My little lynx looks up at me and I wonder why. In the space of 1 week, she has successfully finished 3 homework assignments due the next day, stolen all my lunch, then asked me why she couldn't have more, swatted my friend away, causing an argument during class, broken my umbrella, then laughed in the face of rain, sat on my keyboard and typed an email to my choir director, and cuddled up with me while I'm reading, her soft fur wiping my tears away. So, why? The truth is, I don't know yet, but I'm glad to have her.
Great. And I love those little details from your life as well, the specificity of the email and the choir director, you know, and it wiping your tears away. you know. Yeah, Atlas says, I love how much personality the Lynx has. You know, by the end of the poem, just as with Sally's poem, you know, we feel like we know less, but in a good way, right? There's a quote, I can't remember who it's by now, but he said the purpose of a poem when confronted with a mystery is not to solve the mystery, but to deepen the mystery, right? You know, everything else in life is telling us, you know, solve the mystery. What does that mean? Figure it out, paraphrase it, right? Yeah. When a poem sees a mystery, it wants to make it bigger, right? And that in that way, every time you read a poem, it makes the world bigger, because we feel the unknown widening around us, and that's what all of your poems are doing. Well done. Okay, yeah. Right. Let's do at least one other thing. You're doing so brilliantly. Okay. So what have we covered so far? Freedom, the whole of freedom, looking at things strangely, committing to an idea and making it real for yourself. I want to, it might not surprise you hearing what I said, but this might be quite controversial considering the title of this workshop, but I never use the word metaphor when I'm writing, right, ever. Not that the word metaphor is really useful when you're studying a poem, but for me personally, it's not useful when you're writing a poem, because what it does is it makes you kind of treat it like an equation. So you go, this image represents X in me, right? And if you do that, there's a kind of, you question the image, and you also kind of try and contain it to one interpretation. Whereas when I'm writing, I want to just, I try and think in pictures, but I don't concern myself too much with what those pictures mean, right? Afterwards, after I've written it, you know, I might think, oh, well, of course, this is clearly about my son, or this is clearly about whatever, right? But if I focus on that too much, if I'm constantly thinking this is a metaphor, then I'm not really in it. Does that make sense? So, and so I don't know if you've heard the word, probably have, but surrealism. So I write a lot of surrealism, right? Surrealism, the sur is French, meaning on top of. And because often when people think of surrealism, they think like, oh, fantastical, meaning that's kind of like away from reality. But actually, surrealism is like heightened reality. Yes, you might be writing a poem about a woman who gives birth to a wolf, or a toddler who crawls down the motorway at 30 miles an hour, whatever, right? But when you're writing it, you have to believe it, that it's real, right? And that's what makes a surreal poem really powerful. And it then becomes a metaphor all by itself. You don't have to worry about that. Your job is to dream the dream, not to wake up from the dream constantly and scratch your head and go, oh, what does this mean? Okay, so I'll show you a poem that's a kind of example of that, right? So this is a poem by Mona Arshy called In Mexico, the Women Are Marrying Trees. Last night, I went all the way with a tree. I headed to the forest, past the lake, the thicket of wild junipers, blossoms still young and mute, the insensible fungi on the floor of the vast forest of leaves. The others came, slipped in like silent emissaries towards the dark colossal frame, the waiting grooms. So many trees, we sighed, so much loneliness. In the golden hour, we parted the bark, then married them. If you press your ear to its body, the oak, it doesn't sing, it rings. You follow the sound deep inside the speech is always fettered to the root. We raved all night, our impatient husbands still ringing out their oaths. Now, what I love about that poem is the precision, right? When you're hearing it, right? She is completely convinced, and therefore she convinces you. Okay, just yes, those junipers she didn't actually walk through the junipers. There was no thicket, blah 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 blah. But in the poem, there is, and it's real, and people are really marrying these trees, right? And that's part of the magic. And it's, yes, it's a metaphor, but you couldn't just say, oh, well, this clearly is a metaphor for this one thing. It could be so many different things. It can be different things on different days, depending on how you read it. She's just made it real for herself. So yeah, Atlas, I love the double meaning of rings. Exactly, rings. Right, now I would like you to pick an object, right? Doesn't have to be interesting. No, it doesn't have to be small like the ones you picked before. Could be a wall, could be a bookcase, could be a desk, could be it could be the Eiffel Tower. And I want you to imagine, well, you don't have to marry it. You might think, well, I'm a bit young to get married, but who knows? You can if you want, or it can become, your closest relationship. Okay, so suddenly your closest relationship, closest friendship is with that apple tree, right? Or is with your fridge. Okay, but this is the thing: you've got to make it real, right? I know you just did that with the animal one, but I want you to up that, right? So that precision of the intimacy between you and this fridge, or you, because now I don't want you to know what it's a metaphor for at all. Okay, you don't know why you're writing about this friendship that you've got with a bench. Okay, you're just going to commit to the reality of it and see at the end if it feels like a metaphor for anything, right? So that's the game. You're just going to commit to the game of being like, yeah, this is true. I am getting married to, or I am, I've got a new best friend who is a lawnmower, right? But this isn't a joke. So if you get married to a wall, you can't be like, oh, it always stood by me. Do you know what I mean? Like, try and not be ironic, right? Because that'll make it not real. You got to take it seriously. That's the fun thing about surrealism, is like, the weirder the idea is, the more seriously you have to take it. That's part of the oddness of the job. Okay, you're doing so well. We're going to do just one more exercise, then we might do a tiny, tiny fun thing right at the end. You're nearly there. I know you're knackered. You can do it. Just 5 minutes for this one, because you're fast now. Go. 2 more minutes, keep going. If in doubt, just make rash decisions. Okay, come back to me again through the storm clouds. So just as with the fork exercise, you can start from the most simple, seemingly boring place. You can start from a fork, you can start from a mug. You can also start from the strangest place. You can say, right, I'm gonna write a poem about marrying a tree. I'm gonna write a poem about keeping a severed head as a pet. Right? You can start from anywhere. That's what John Ashbery said. He said, begin anywhere. Right? And actually, you'll often find it surprises you. You can sometimes start from the most kind of weird and violent place, and it will lead you somewhere quite touching often, you know. Or you can start, as Oscar did, from a mug of tea, and you end up, you know, in the pits of hell, or in, you know, extreme loneliness. Like the poems will disobey you, right? And that's what's so wonderful about them. That's partly why I don't think of, when I'm writing, I don't think of words like metaphor and simile, even though I use them all the time, because I don't want to think that I'm doing kind of an equation. I want to be able to see and feel as I'm writing. I want it to happen to me. I would love to hear what people either married or had a best friendship with, all these relationships that just went on in the last 5 minutes. That would be great in the chat, or if anyone wants to read again. A window, nice. Is everyone else still in there? Some sea glass, nice. Window, some sea glass. Sally, would you like to read yours? A pencil, a room, a chimney. Oh yeah, hello.
Okay, so yeah, this is about a window. So, it didn't propose to me with a ring, the window, but instead promised me the sky. It said it will give me birdsong and trees for as long as I'm alive. And I need only look out through its glass and see the stars to know for certain that our love will last.
Nice. And in 5 minutes as well, something from nothing. Boom. There we have And of course it ends up being about, you know, loads of human relationships. There's so many people who would read that and see themselves in it, but you just concentrate on that relationship with the window. Do you want to read it one more time?
Yeah. It didn't propose to me the ring, the window, but instead promised me the sky. It said it will give me birdsong and trees for as long as I'm alive. And I need only look out through its glass and see the stars to know for certain that our love will last.
So much contained within such a small container, you know. Brilliant. Thank you, Sally.
Thank you.
Oh, can I ask, Dumfries Academy, what are your names, the three of you? Pencil, room, and chimney, just so I can kind of picture you. That would be great. A pencil, a room, and a chimney. I love the idea of marrying a room, marrying a pencil, marrying a chimney. Yeah. Atlas sent his. The door's my cousin on my father's side. He moved in after our grandmother died, and for weeks he creaked and moaned. Sometimes I try to talk with him, but he won't let me in. But family is family by blood and by grain. I have gone through so much with him and he with me. Great. I love the solidity of that and the vastness within the idea. Finley, Taylor, and Heather. Hello, Finley, Taylor, and Heather. Would any of you like to read, perchance? Well, let me know. Let me know. Oh yeah, cool, perfect. Hello.
Can you unmute yourself, Dumfries Academy? You're muted.
Hi, is that all right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. I'm Heather. I'm the one that wrote about the chimney.
Perfect.
I spend my nights by the chimney. She is, in every way, perfect. I don't mean to say that I sit by the fire. That is a very different beast, and altogether similar. Sometimes that is as close as we get to touching. Or I sit on the stairs with my cheek pressed against the wall. It feels slightly warmer there, and I sometimes trick myself into thinking that it is really the wispy touch of her tenderness that I am feeling. She is gentle that way, not like fire at all, none of that incendiary passion. She is kinder. Her love is kinder. I fall to her easily.
Oh, Heather, I love it. I love it. I love the specificity of it. We're not talking about the fire. That's a very different beast. This is the chimney, and that image of you going to and putting your cheek to the wall, you know, and the mystery of it. But yet it felt so real to me as I was hearing it. Brilliant work. Catherine said that was so tender. Yeah. And yet also this, what was that line about the wispy, like, what was the line about it? Maybe it's her wispy, not tendrils. What was it, Heather? That I feel.
I sometimes trick myself into thinking that it is really the wispy touch of her tenderness that I'm feeling.
Yeah, I sometimes trick myself into feeling that is the wispy tenderness of her touch that I'm feeling. Yeah, there's tenderness in that, but there's also this kind of like loneliness and eeriness in it as well, you know. And that's what I love about poetry, is that you can have so many feelings contained within one image. Just like, you know, if you look at someone's eye and you think, oh, they've got blue eyes, yeah, and then you look a bit closer and you realize they've got flecks of gray in there, flecks of amber, flecks of brown even. And it's the same with an emotion. Like you feel an emotion in a poem, and then you read it in a different way, and there's flecks of joy, and there's flecks of sadness, and there's flecks of anger, you know, and that's what brings it to life, and it makes it human. Okay, thank you. So in this last 10 minutes, we're going to do one more thing, right? So I don't use the word metaphor, but I do use this rather silly invented word that I've made up called isness, right? And what I mean by isness is, how do you populate the poem with stuff that you can see, right? Like your custard creams, your walls that you put your cheek to, the roof that you climb onto, right? All of those things, the isness of the poem, the the can of tuna, the mug, the custard creams, etc. I keep on coming back to custard creams, is what makes it real, right? And makes us think, just like when we're in a dream, oh no, this is really happening. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a list of words you've never seen before, words I only just came up with today, and you're going to give yourself, and you're not going to worry about making sense. You're just going to treat them like paints on a palette. You're just going to fling them at the page and see what happens from these words that have a kind of isness to them. Of course, you can use as many of the words you like. You don't have to use them all. You've only got like 5 minutes, 4 minutes or something, but just kind of have fun with them. Okay, so these are the words, some of which I don't entirely understand myself. So Ludo, that's basically snakes and ladders without the snakes and ladders. Hovercraft, fright wig, which could mean lots of different things, but I think it's often referred to, your hair in the morning, but it could also be a literal wig. Calcium, Scotch egg, chunder. I don't know if you use that word for throwing up. Wind farm, baleful, which is, I did look, baleful, what does that even mean again? I can't remember. I think it means, what does it mean? Baleful, it's good though, isn't it? Baleful, it means threatening harm or menacing. Bill shot a baleful glance in her direction. Uphaul, carpet burn, cognac, Pleasantville, locomotive, forklift foot, which I think is that thing on a forklift truck that lifts it up. Pith, like you get on a orange. Printout, I have lots of them at school. Hackathon, which I looked up today, which is apparently lots of people getting together to hack things on their, not like an axe murderer convention, like getting together, to hack on a computer. An inner tube, which I think I have on my bicycle. So who knows what's going to happen when you use those poems. You don't have to use those words. You don't have to use them in that order. Just see what happens. Try and use them all. That's the game. Just treat it like a game and see what happens after you knit something together. Okay. 4 minutes. You're going to have to make crazy decisions, and it probably won't make any sense at all, but then maybe it will. Who knows? Doesn't matter either way. Life doesn't make sense. Go. Okay, now I gave you a ridiculously short amount of time for that, and I am sorry about that. I wish I could have given you a bit longer, but the webinar ends at 5:30, and I don't want us to be unceremoniously suddenly everything goes blank. And we've packed in basically a 3-hour workshop into about an hour and a half. So you've done it spectacularly well. And I hope from this you get a sense of, first of all, how much you can do with images, but also like that the rules are of your own making, and part of the purpose of images is to make yourself feel something as you're writing it, right? Something that you can't necessarily explain or paraphrase. Lindsay, have we got enough time to hear someone read, or does it literally stop at 5:30?
No, it'll carry on. We won't chop you off.
Okay. I was worried that someone might be in the middle of reading this out and it would suddenly go boom.
No.
We'd all disappear.
No, I'm in control of the end button, and I'm not going near it.
Perfect. Thank you. Would someone like to read theirs? I know I gave you a short amount of time, so I stand underneath a turbine in the wind farm. The plane wing blades whoosh in circles. I take my calcium pills. You don't get much milk where I'm staying. Pleasantville was long ago. It was simple back then. I woke up, had a Scotch egg, and drove my locomotive. All I have now are hovercrafts and pills. Isn't that great? That's great in 4 minutes, right? So much packed into it. Go on, Atlas. And I like your typo of quiet short.
Hi, that was quite... Okay, this is mine. Ludo went to Pleasantville on the baleful day. He took the raucous locomotive, or so the hovercrafts say. The sky was piffy with poultry, and the smith was selling Scotch eggs. Ludo ordered a mug of chunder and drained it to its dregs.
Brilliant. And you even made it rhyme as well, which often doesn't work when you've got a short space of time, but you managed to make it work. It's something about the draining a mug of chunder as well. That's what they picked up on. Drained it to its dregs. Now that image is stuck in my mind. Thank you, Atlas.
Thank you.
That thing about an image getting stuck in your mind, that is also the purpose of an image in a poem, so that it stays with us, isn't it? So it hooks onto our imagination after we've read it, and pops up when we least expect it. Okay, you have all worked so hard, and even though I haven't seen most of your faces, I feel like I've met you all, and I know how hard you've worked, and everything you've read. I've been incredibly. It's deepened my mystery, so thank you. Have a wonderful evening, and cheers.